Hey folks, I am back on trail, and this week I am backpacking one of the most scenic backpacking loops in all of Colorado, the Four Pass Loop. And while I'm out here, I figured I would give you some hammock tips from the trail. This week we're going to talk about how to stay warm in your hammock. Let's get to it. I am out here this week backpacking with my wife, and that's what gave me the idea about tips on how to stay warm while you are hammock camping. Because my wife gets really cold and she has to do some additional stuff to help make sure that she can stay warm. So that gave me the idea of, well, let me talk about the tips that I use on how to stay warm in my hammock. Tip number one, know the rating of your gear. So for quilts, whether it's a top quilt or an underquilt, you get a degree rating from the manufacturer. And sometimes that degree rating is for survival level or it's for comfort level. So I have the ZenBivy sleep system and it is rated at a 25-degree bag. And well, that is, as I read online, I believe that is rated at a survival level. So that will keep you alive, not necessarily nice and warm in your hammock if it gets down to 25 degrees. I believe the comfort rating for that quilt is 35 degrees. So it's good to know what your gear is rated, whether it's a comfort rating or whether it is a survival rating. Same thing for sleep pads. So my Nemo Tensor insulated pad has an R value of 4. The big Agnes sleep pad I have that Nancy's using on this trip is rated at a 4.7. So the higher the number, the warmer that you will be. But that's another thing that you need to consider. Even though you may know the rating of your gear, how are you? What type of sleeper are you? So for me, I sleep very warm. I sleep hot. As for my wife, she sleeps cold. So that 25-degree sleeping bag, she used that a couple weeks ago when we were car camping at Crested Butte, and she still got cold, because she is a cold sleeper, so she needs something a little bit more. All right, this is my wife set up for keeping her warm. So she has the ZenBivy, again, 25-degree. She also has another 10-degree quilt because she gets colder. So you need to be mindful of what type of sleeper are you? Are you a hot or cold sleeper? And what is the rating of your gear? Because you're going to want to test it out, because 25 degrees may not mean that you're going to be warm at 25 degrees. For my wife, that 25 degrees meant that she'd be warm at 45 degrees because she is a cold sleeper. But that's one of the things that you'll need to figure out before you even go on your backpacking trip, is know the rating of your gear and what type of sleeper you are, whether you're hot or cold. Tip number 2 involves using an underquilt or a sleeping pad in your hammock. So for an underquilt, as you've seen some of my videos, that there's a lot of fine tuning that you have to do on both ends of that underquilt. There's gaps on the sides that you have to close. There is whether you sleep right to left, left to right, and where the underquilt needs to be when you sleep at night. Because for me, it took a little bit of getting used to understand that my feet could, pop out on one side of the underquilt if I did not have it aligned properly, or my head on the other end. So I had to fine tune that, because as soon as your body parts go out from the underquilt, that's when you start getting cold. So you need to make sure that you have your underquilt dialed in and aligned how you need it for how you're going to sleep, whether you're a left to right or right to left. As for the sleeping pad, for me, I like a wide sleeping pad. So a few weeks ago, I was backpacking at the Lost Creek Wilderness, and I had a smaller sleep pad because I was trying to save a little weight. I think it was only 20 inches wide, and my shoulders would get a little bit cold because they fall off of the sleeping pad, or my arms do. So for me, I recommend getting a wider and longer pad that you need for your height. That way your entire body can be on that pad. Because similar to the underquilt, you know, once your feet come off of that pad, that's when you'll start getting cold. So if your underquilt is not aligned right, you're going to get cold during the night. If your sleeping pad is not big enough, you're going to get cold in the night. And then make sure that sleeping pad has a high enough R value. Going back to tip number one, you know, not only that it is wide and long, because I think that's will give you better coverage, but make sure that that R value is high enough for you and how you sleep, so you don't get cold during the night. So other than just having your underquilt aligned properly to keep you warm during the night, you also want to check it for gaps. So I've noticed in the past, whenever I've watched like my underquilt or my top quilt and I'm trying to dry it, sometimes the down, it clumps up in some of the baffles. And if that down is not spread out evenly across those baffles, you're gonna have cold spots. Happened to me one time with one of my top quilts. The middle right on top of me, it was all down to the sides and by my feet, and so I had a cold spot right on my chest. I haven't had it happen on my underquilt, but I would say just be mindful of that. Check your quilt to make sure that the down is not clumping up, or that could cause you some cold spots. Tip number 3 is to bring extra layers of clothes to keep you warm at night and that are easily accessible in your hammock. So when I go backpacking, when I sleep, I like to sleep in something like this, just a regular hoodie and shorts. I don't put on anything else. I want to be warm going to bed like that. When I crawl into my underquilt or my quilt, I want to be warm with just those clothes on. But I want to have extra clothes that are easily accessible in case I do getting cold in the night. Now when I start getting cold, the first things for me that get cold are my feet, that's the very first thing, my head, and my hands. So on all my backpacking trips, I will bring with me a little beanie for my head. I'll bring an extra pair of socks for my feet, and sometimes some down booties to keep my feet warm, and a pair of gloves. Like I said, I want those to be easily accessible when I'm in my hammock. I don't want to have to get out of my hammock and go look in my backpack. You know, I don't want to have to go searching for it. I want it easily accessible. So that's what I do to help keep me warm in the night. Another thing I always bring with me on my backpacking trips is a rain jacket. So I have the Frog Togs rain jacket, and I love it because it's not breathable, which is something I do like, and it's kind of my outer shell. It's my last line of defense of keeping me warm. And so if I'm really getting cold in the night and I've already put on my puffy and I have all my layers and I'm still cold, then I will resort to putting on my rain jacket in the middle of the night. Now for me, the first thing that gets cold during the night are my feet. And I've always heard about people who, you know, they'll bring Nalgene bottles and fill it up with warm water and sleep with it in the foot of their sleeping bag or quilt. Well, that never really made much sense to me. One, Nalgene bottles are super heavy. I don't want to carry that. Two, I never liked the idea of keeping liquids where I sleep in case something leaks and everything gets wet. So that always made me nervous. And third, just having that Nalgene bottle at my feet doesn't seem like it would be comfortable, especially being in a hammock, you know, where my feet are a little bit elevated. That Nalgene bottle is just going to roll down. So I never caught on with the idea of keeping my feet warm that way. So that's why I bring an extra pair of socks and those down booties sometime if I think that the weather's really going to drop. That's going to help keep my feet warm during the night. Another way that I use my extra layers to help keep me warm during the night is if I'm feeling cold spots. So I don't always just use my extra layers or putting on my body. Sometimes I may feel a cold spot by my knee or my shoulder or whatever, you know, depending on whatever the reason. And so I'll pull out my puffy or my beanie or maybe even my rain jacket, and I'll fill in those cold spots to help keep me warm. So I don't just use the extra layers for putting on my body, I'll also use them to fill in those cold spots. Tip number 4 is one that I have already discussed in another video that I've done, and how to sleep better in your hammock. And that is, I bring a clothes bag. So I have a Z-Packs clothes bag, and when you turn it inside out, it has this nice soft cover on it. And I put my clothes in there because I bring camp clothes when I go backpacking, because when I get done with the day, I like to put in a pair of clean camp clothes and feel just refreshed. That helps me sleep better at night. But the clothes bag, that's where I'll keep my beanie, my gloves, you know, extra pair of socks, my puffy, things like that. And so I can easily access it. Because this is a side bonus tip here, not about keeping warm, but I put that clothes bag underneath my legs, underneath my knees when I sleep in the hammock, and it gives me a little more support. So whenever I need those extra layers, then I can easily, you know, access them from my clothes bag. Now, the extra tip even for that in terms of staying warm, of having that clothes bag, is I put my hiking clothes in there from that day, right? So the fact that I am putting those hiking clothes and my socks in that clothes bag, and then I'm keeping it underneath my legs, they're warm. So not just trying to stay warm during the night, but when I get up in the morning, now I have a warm pair of socks, shorts, shirt that I can put on in the morning. And let me tell you, that's great. So I'm not just about trying to stay warm in my hammock during the night. I'm also want to try to stay warm when I get out of my hammock first thing in the morning. Because if you notice, the coldest part of the day is generally real early in the morning, like that maybe 4 to 6 for the most part. So when you're getting out of your hammock, that's when it's going to be the coldest outside for the most part. So that's why I like having that clothes bag. I like having my hiking clothes from the previous day in that bag, and now they're warm. So I'm putting on, like I said, I'm putting on warm clothes, and that makes all of the difference. And then I have my puffy and my beanie and my gloves, and I put those on as well in my hammock. And so when I'm getting out of my hammock, I am fairly warm. So I'm not stepping out with cold clothes or just this cold feeling of trying to change clothes now that I have to change back into my my hiking clothes. That clothes bag really is, you know, multifunctional for me. So this is the clothes bag that I use, and those who are familiar with the channel have seen this often. It's a Z-Packs bag, and you can fold it inside out. So when I get to camp, I go ahead and put my hiking clothes at the bottom and the clothes that I want to easily access at the top. And then it has this nice soft material that makes it, you know, nice for putting underneath my legs when I sleep at night, and gives me a little support. Like I said, easy access. So if I'm sleeping in my hammock at night and I start getting cold, I've got a puffy jacket that I can easily get to because it's underneath my legs. I have my little beanie hat. These are the bushtail possum gloves I just got from Z-Packs, and they're pretty nice. I like them. They're really keeping my hands warm. The jury's still out of how much I can use them like around camp using my fingers, but so far so good. I like these. And then if I think it's gonna get cold, because again, my feet get cold first. So sometimes I bring these little down booties and they're great. They weigh nothing and they are awesome. And then I just have my hiking clothes. So it's my shirt, socks, and then shorts. All right, so the clothes bag gives me easy access to clothes that I need during the night. If I get cold, it keeps my hiking clothes warm for me when I'm changing the next morning. And it gives me good support underneath my legs when I'm sleeping at night. So this is an awesome piece of gear that I love and will always take with me on my backpacking trips when I am hammock camping. Hiking tip number 5, and this one may seem duh. I also explain this one in my Sleeping Better in a Hammock, and that is don't go to bed cold. So when I'm going to bed, you know, I don't want any part of my body to be cold, because if you go to bed cold, you're going to sleep cold. Because like we talked about earlier, you know, as you're moving around and getting your hammock, should be fairly warm, and it's only going to get colder throughout the night, because the coldest part of the day is around that 4 to 6. Your body has stopped moving and you're going to just get colder during the night if you are not prepared. So if you're going to bed cold, you are going to sleep cold for the rest of the night. So some things that I do to help keep me warm is, obviously if you have a fire, that is great. That can help keep you warm as you're getting into your hammock. I've seen people do jumping jacks, push-ups, anything to get your heart rate going. For me, you know, getting into my hammock and cleaning and maybe changing clothes right before I go to bed, so all my clothes are nice and fresh. Moving around in my hammock and getting dressed and undressed in my hammock creates that body heat and creates that warmth. And so that's some of the things that I do to make sure that I don't go to bed cold. Because if you're going to bed cold, you're going to be cold for the rest of the night. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Those are a few tips that I use to help me keep warm in my hammock, because there's nothing worse than being cold in your hammock and getting a horrible night's sleep because you're freezing to death. And so those are just a few of the things that I use that have helped me over the time to stay warm in my hammock. All right, well, I think that's gonna do it. Signing off from 4 Pass Loop. And if you haven't done this backpacking trip, this is one you need to put on your bucket list because it is stunning. Thanks for watching. So here is my wife enjoying my hammock. Like I said, one of the best things about having a hammock is not just sitting, like right there, she's just lounging and relaxing. And that is just the best.